Here we are, just days away from the Resident Evil 3 remake giving us a brand new version of Jill Valentine. Like the Resident Evil 2 remake before, this game promises a fresh new take on everybody's favorite Master of Unlocking, but before we get to know this new Jill, let's take a look back at the history of one of the Resident Evil franchise's original and most popular protagonists. Jill Valentine, who may or may not be the daughter and protege of a professional thief, presumably rebelled against her father by doing what many teenagers do when they try to get away from their parents. She joined the army, where she learned marksmanship, bomb disposal, and even trained to be part of Delta Force in spite of the fact that Delta Force does not recruit women. At some point, Jill also picked up classical piano because apparently she just didn't feel accomplished enough yet. Jill's abilities eventually caught the attention of one Albert Wesker, who convinced her to leave the military and instead work as a cop in a small Midwestern city. The pay must have been incredible. It was here that Jill would meet her longtime partner, Chris Redfield, another ex-military man who found his way to Raccoon City's Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Jill worked for the STARS team for a couple years, and everything was going great until the summer of 1998, when the number of missing hikers and campers suddenly shot way up. The STARS sent their Bravo team out in a helicopter into the Arkley Forest to check it out, only for them to immediately lose contact with the base and vanish into the woods. With Bravo team missing, Jill and the rest of the STARS Alpha team geared up for battle, loading their second helicopter up with enough arms to overthrow a small country. Seriously, the STARS budget must have been obscene. The Alpha team discovered the downed helicopter of Bravo team and even managed to find its pilot. Well, some of him anyway. Things went poorly after that. Zombie dogs attacked Alpha team and their pilot, Brad Vickers, apparently realizing what happened to the last guy, took off with all of the weapons. The surviving members of Alpha team, Jill, Chris, Wesker, and Barry Burton, booked it out of there, taking shelter in a nearby mansion, though Chris may not have made it through the front door with the rest of the group. Jill and Barry investigated the mansion, only to discover that it was littered with zombies, other monsters, and the bodies of several of their former co-workers. It turns out that the mansion was actually the secret laboratory for the Umbrella Corporation, a pharmaceutical giant that happened to have been founded in Raccoon City. The zombies and other monsters were the result of an outbreak of the T-virus, which the company had been using to develop biological weapons. They also discovered that there was a traitor among STARS, and that they had been set up for a nefarious purpose. In actuality, there were two traitors, Wesker, who had a second job as an Umbrella researcher, and Barry, who was being blackmailed by Wesker to do his dirty work, lest something terrible happened to Barry's family. As it turns out, Wesker not only knew about the T-virus outbreak from the start, but sent Bravo team in unprepared as a live test for the bioweapons. Wesker had planned on using Alpha Team's superior firepower to clear the area, only to kill them all and steal the newly completed Tyrant and start his own company. However, that plan went up in smoke when Brad chickened out, so he had to improvise the rest. The surviving STARS members ultimately confronted Wesker in the mansion's basement laboratory as he planned to steal the Tyrant. Unfortunately, Wesker woke the Tyrant up a little too early and ended up getting gutted by his own creation. Meeting up with surviving Bravo team member Rebecca Chambers, who activated the mansion's self-destruct system, the remaining STARS got Brad's attention, finished off the Tyrant once and for all, and got out of there before the whole place blew up. But though they reached relative safety, their troubles were only just beginning. Apparently, losing 2/3 of their co-workers was a bad look for the elite unit. Nobody believed their report about a monster-filled mansion, and even if they did, the bulk of the local government was on Umbrella's payroll in one way or another anyway. After weeks of banging his head against a wall, Chris decided he had enough and went rogue, cashing in his vacation time and heading for Europe to start investigating Umbrella's operations across the pond. He probably should have told his sister that he was going, but that's another video. In either case, Chris is gone and Jill was ready to follow him, but she took a little too long to pack. In late September of 1998, the T-virus broke out in Raccoon City, triggering a quarantine and throwing the city into chaos. Of course, since Jill had already packed up most of her clothes, she was forced to survive this second zombie outbreak in the least practical outfit she owned. All the while, a particularly single-minded chap with a severe skin condition was out hunting her and her surviving co-workers. With Chris in Europe investigating Umbrella, Barry in Canada relocating his family, and Rebecca God knows where, that just leaves Jill and Brad as the remaining STARS members in the city. And then it was just Jill. Teaming up with Carlos Oliveira, a member of a team of Umbrella mercenaries that were clearly in over their heads, Jill managed to secure a route to their escape point, only to see their rescue copter get blown out of the sky. Jill picked up a nasty infection in the subsequent fight and decided to call in sick for the next 2 days of the zombie outbreak. In the meantime, Carlos ran across the street to pick up her prescription at the hospital while she slept it off. Once back on her feet, Jill took a walk through the park and discovered that the entire city was about to be cleansed by the US government. She also finds out that Umbrella had put a bounty on her head, so not only is a 9-foot tentacle monster with a rocket launcher trying to kill her, so is Nikolai, the only remaining Umbrella mercenary that isn't trying to date her. Too bad neither of them fully understood exactly who they were up against. Now, canonically, Nikolai survives to issue a report to Umbrella about the Raccoon City incident, but that just isn't as fun as Jill blowing him up with a rocket launcher. Meanwhile, there's no ambiguity over what happens to Jill's nemesis. One railgun shot and some optional magnum rounds later, the Big N is down for the count. Now all that's left is to literally wait for the bomb to drop. Fortunately, good old Barry has both a helicopter and an excellent sense of timing, picking Jill up just moments before Raccoon City was cleansed. Jill and Carlos escaped the aftermath and then apparently decided to take a little vacation themselves, setting up a boat and hanging out in Mexico for a while. It's not clear what happens after that, but that is the last time we see Carlos, so let your imagination run wild. After catching up on her X-Files episodes, Jill traveled to Europe in pursuit of Chris, who had apparently not had the easiest time staying off of Umbrella's radar during his investigation. Her search for Chris may or may not have gotten sidetracked by a cross-dimensional incident to save the multiverse from a multi-phase demon, but eventually they do find each other. Back together at last, Jill and Chris joined a private anti-biohazard service, an international organization dedicated to investigating and neutralizing the rapidly increasing number of bioweapon attacks around the world. All the while, they continued to search for evidence that would conclusively tie Umbrella to the Raccoon City incident, as Umbrella had been engaged in a lengthy legal battle with the US government since then. It took just over 4 years, but they finally got their big break. In February of 2003, Jill and Chris took a team into southern Russia to investigate a T-virus outbreak. Their investigation led them to yet another secret Umbrella lab, and for possibly the first and last time in the company's history, it didn't explode when they were done with it. As a result, enough evidence was gathered to drive Umbrella into bankruptcy, and the company was dissolved for good. Which is not to say there weren't loose ends to be tied up. It turns out Wesker is not only still alive, but he had gained superpowers and had been working behind the scenes to corner the market on biological weapons. With bioterror attacks on the rise, Jill, Chris, and several others formed the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, or the BSAA. As a non-government entity, the BSAA did what they could, but were limited in their authority, causing issues when they bumped up against the United States' own Federal Bioterror Commission. Particularly during an incident when Veltro terrorists launched a bioweapon attack on the floating city of Terra Grigia, and yes, that is a lot of revelations to throw at somebody all at once. Anyway, in 2005, the BSAA split the Dream Team. Chris got a new partner in Jessica Sharawat, the thirstiest triple agent he would ever meet, and was sent out into the mountains of Finland to investigate reports of Veltro terrorists. At the same time, Jill got teamed up with Parker Luciani, the BSAA's most lovable teddy bear. Being told that Chris and Jessica had gone missing in the Mediterranean Sea, the duo set sail and found a derelict cruise ship filled to the brim with monsters infected by the T-Abyss virus. A series of conspiracies and double crosses later, Chris and Jill reunited, took on a bunch of monsters, sunk 2 different cruise ships, and proved that the commissioner of the FBC was behind the attack the entire time. The FBC collapsed from the scandal and its resources were absorbed into the BSAA, which gained recognition by the UN and was granted much greater authority in combating bioterrorism. But still, more loose ends to tie up. In 2006, Jill and Chris received a tip that led them to Umbrella's founder, Oswell Spencer, who had been hiding since the collapse of his company. Inside yet another Spencer mansion, the dynamic duo found a little more than they bargained for. The superhuman Wesker beat them to the punch, killing Spencer before showing off his Matrix cosplay to his old co-workers. Things weren't looking great for our heroes, but Jill used tackle and it was super effective. She and Wesker tumbled out the window and vanished without a trace, ultimately being declared dead after months of searching. Distraught over the apparent death of his partner, Chris poured his grief into his biceps and buried himself in his work. In 2009, he was dispatched to Africa, where he teamed up with another new partner, Sheva Alomar, investigating rumors of a new bioweapon and the possible sighting of his former partner. The pair quickly discovered that both rumors were true. The Ouroboros virus was a particularly nasty new bioweapon that theoretically could turn the worthy into some kind of perfect human, but everybody pretty much turned into a giant wormy tentacle monster instead. And who could be behind such a nasty piece of work? Why, Wesker, of course. No longer satisfied with money or power, Wesker had spent the last 3 years working on Ouroboros so he could become the new leader of humanity. His plan was to spread the virus around the world, achieving complete global saturation, so that he could become the ruler of a couple dozen genetic lottery winners and about 6 billion tentacle monsters. Oh, and surprise, surprise, Jill's alive! Thanks to the various viruses she'd been exposed to during her career, Wesker kept her around to help develop his Ouroboros strain. At the same time, she was also used as a test subject for a mind control project and turned into Wesker's personal slave. And just to see how much worse it could possibly get for her, the experiments also turned her hair blonde. Anyway, Chris and Sheva encountered Jill and pulled the mind control right out of her. Finally freed from Wesker's control, Jill gave them the information they needed to stop Wesker once and for all. A little bit of boulder punching and a couple rockets later, Wesker was finally finished for good and the Ouroboros threat was no more. And that is actually the end of the adventures of Jill Valentine. Over the next decade, Chris would go on to combat bioterrorism in video games, movies, manga, and even a stage play. However, he does it all without Jill, who apparently spends years being tested by the BSAA and then just kind of vanishes from the franchise. Outside of another cross-dimensional caper, Jill hasn't been seen or heard from since her rescue. Ironic, considering she remains one of the Resident Evil franchise's most recognizable characters. And now with RE3 Remake giving her a bit of a reboot, who knows if we'll ever see Jill from 2009 in a contemporary entry of the series. But there you have it, the life and times of Jill Valentine cut tragically short but never forgotten. So, what do you think Jill has been up to in the last decade? Give me your best theories in the comments and subscribe to my channel to see what else I come up with. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great day!